I was thinking about, I've worked for Rabbi Brovender and I've worked for Rabbi Steinsaltz. I think they're both great. I've had my ups and downs with both of them, but I have tremendous respect for both of them. So what? This reminds me of a story that was once told about Rabbi Brovender saw a guy maybe coming into the yeshiva, and he was in a wheelchair or had crutches or something, handicapped, right? So he was sitting and he was learning from a Steinsaltz Talmud. So he said, he didn't say it to his face, but they saw him on the other side of the room, and someone said, so-and-so, Freddie is learning from Steinsaltz Gemara. Rabbi Brovender replied, wait a second, he's already handicapped. Now, in order to get the joke, you have to understand something about the Steinsaltz Gemara, which is that it explains everything. Art Scroll, it explains everything. Steinsaltz explains everything. Steinsaltz did it first, of course, and Art Scroll, took over. Now Steinsaltz is taking over again. It doesn't matter. There's also another English translation coming out. I don't know who. So there's this whole industry of translating holy writings, like the Talmud. And the problem with if everything's explained, the thing is it's all translated from a Ram Shas, the old style Vilna edition of the Talmud. And with the Ram Shas, you have to be able to read the Gemara without punctuation, generally, and be able to read Rashi in the Rashi script. And if you can learn the Tosfos, all is well. If you can only learn the Rashi, that's a very great achievement. Also, Rashi is not so easy to learn how to read. Once you can understand Rashi, then you realize that all of these English translations, such as the Steinsaltz and the Art Scroll, they're all just basically, as a matter of policy, rephrasing Rashi in a modern language or a different language. So what? So I may be using this, old edition of the Steinsaltz Talmud, but basically I'm using Rashi. I just want to note that Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote in his introduction to the Talmud that, in order to study this, which is all vocalized and it's laid out in a new, easy-to-read way, you don't need to put in your own vowels, which is one of the first things in learning the Talmud, is to know how to say the words, right? Because it's not vowel. The vowels aren't there in Hebrew. They just have the Hebrew letters. To get used to it, it takes a few years. So, but if you're strong, you persevere. Hi Ariel, how's it going? My son Ariel's his birthday. You want to say hi? I'm recording for Internet Land. You want to say hi? Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Ariel.
Okay, well, who said no, the dog can't be here?
I didn't say the dog can't be here.
Who said that?
I didn't say it. You heard something. Maybe you heard something else and you thought it was said. So, yes, so, where was I? The problem with everything being explained is not doing the old style of using your brain and figuring out for yourself with the Hevruta. But Rabbi Steinsaltz writes in his introduction to start with the old Vilna Shas and then go to his edition and use it as an educational tool in order to understand what's written in the standard edition of the Talmud. I don't think that's necessarily has to be. I mean, that's a good way. That's something that might appease the religious world, the super duper religious world. To Rav Shach, Rav Shach was a great scholar and a big leader. However, for some reason, he had a mystical, in Rabbi Brovender's quote, he said he had a, quote, mystical attachment to the form of the page of the old Vilna Shas, unquote. So he thought it was an affront to the Jewish spirit to change the form of the page. I say that's nonsense, with all due respect. Just because generations have become used to a 200-year-old edition does not mean that the words were not changed. The words were, if the words were changed, it was based on serious and dedicated research in the old editions and the old manuscripts in order to come up with a proper version. Because initially there were many different versions of the Talmud manuscripts, and it was compiled together in the Vilna edition based on their version. And there are other manuscripts, and the Vilna Shas is not God. The Talmud is not God. God is one. He gave us the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and the prophets spoke through God. But the Talmud is basically man-made, and but it's made by not just men, but great scholars with great dedication to the whole tradition from Mount Sinai. Okay, so let's learn some Gemara. Let me just, but before we go to the Gemara, let me just conclude with this little introduction about the history of the Talmud and the new publications. That you don't. It is good to learn, to be able to learn from regular.
Another one.
Yeah, I'm putting it up. This is my 4th cigarette today, and I told my son to take a cigarette out of my hand and put water on it or something if he catches me with another. So I was trying to keep it to 3 a day, but caught red-handed. So, just the point is to learn, and to learn the writings and work it out, and work out the ideas. Nowadays we have video games and we have television. But in the old days, the entertainment. You ask a Jew 200 years ago what he wants in life, and he'd say, "I'd like a warm seat by the fire and a Talmud with good printing, good lettering." Because in the old days, in the house of study, it was cold. The snow was up to here in Poland, and they didn't have such great heating and all the time. But they did have good. In the house of study, in some houses, they had good heating and a good stove. And the closer you were to the stove, it's comfortable on those cold, dark winter days or nights. And books were very rare. Books were very hard to come by. To somebody with books, it was considered more valuable than gold. A good edition of the Shas, good editions of Hasidic books, Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, the Kabbalah, a good edition of the old editions of the Kabbalistic writings. They were the most precious possessions of the Jewish people in those days, and nowadays we're spoiled to death practically. We're spoiled into numbness and complacency. So support your local Jewish bookseller. The Mishnah said we were talking about the laws of Shabbos. Now we were talking about heating up water, Shabbos, and whether you can heat up water or not. What if you pour hot water into cold water? What if you pour cold water into hot water? What's the law? Is that cooking? You're heating up the water. If you're heating up water, basically the law is if you heat up water to the point where you can't touch it, that's cooking. If you heat up water and you can still put your hand in it and it's okay, not going to burn yourself, and you can comfortably put your hand in. If you go like, then it's cooked water. If you put it in, it's like, then it's okay. Be careful of how you test this, of course. You might want to use your least favorite person's hand. No, just kidding. So the Talmud does not advocate violence or mean tricks, unless, of course, the person is a rapist and a murderer, in which case consult your local rabbi. So, remember the Shmuel could Rabbi Shimon Svirle. So we're saying, like Shmuel said that, the other thing that's great about my YouTube and that the other YouTube Talmud classes don't have, I say like and and they don't. So take your pick. So that Shmuel said that the question is, does Shmuel follow Rabbi Shimon's shita? Rabbi Shimon said Davar she'eino mitkaven is muter. In other words, if you do an action such as you're tempering a metal urn, right? So you want to put it, but the urn is hot. You just poured hot water in it, right? And if you were to pour cold water onto that hot metal, that's like tempering the metal. Tempering the metal is a violation of the Sabbath. It's called the tzaref, or mitzaref. And so, why? Because on one hand, it could be makeh b'patish, meaning that putting the final touch on any creation, any manufacture of any object, complete the manufacture of the object is one of the 39 prohibited forms of work. It's called makeh b'patish, hitting with a hammer. Meaning they always to finish the making a chalice, a metal vessel. The silversmith puts that final touch, and it's perfect. Right? So, but it's not really, it's not a prohibition of mitzaref. It's because if you know anything about metalsmithing, they do this many times through the. It's really not the final stage of metalsmithing. Is the tempering of the metal. The tempering is an intermediate stage. So it's not a violation of makeh b'patish. It would rather be part of. It's something that's done to tikkun mana. Tikkun mana means mana is Aramaic for vessel. So fixing a vessel, right? So to make the things you do to make something are prohibited on the Sabbath. So tempering the vessel by putting the cold water, a copious amount of the cold water, into the hot metal urn would be a violation of tikkun mana. So the question is whether you're intended or not to do that action. If the action is unintended, and there's a question whether or not the putting the water in will in fact temper the metal, then it is permitted according to the system of Rabbi Shimon. So, are we saying that Shmuel is following the system of Rabbi Shimon? What did Shmuel say? So Shmuel said that even if you put in a copious amount of water that's enough to temper the metal, it's still permitted. But now we go on. The name of the Shmuel, so that would lead us to assume that Shmuel is following the method of Rabbi Shimon.
Well, Mar Shmuel, but that doesn't make sense. Don't we have a contradictory statement of Shmuel which says Mechabin gachelet al matechet b'rshut rabim bishvil shelo yizoku ba rabim aval lo gachelet shel etz. So Shmuel says another statement that says you're walking down the street and you see a burning red hot metal, or even not red hot metal, just very hot metal, right? And you say, oh, somebody could get hurt from this. So it's on the Sabbath. It's on the Sabbath, and there's this super hot metal in the middle of the street. People walking around barefoot, or even not standing by it, could cause a person to burn their shoes or whatever. It's whatever. So Shmuel said that you can actually perhaps douse water on, or somehow, let's say you happen to have how would you put it out? It could be put out by taking your gloves and taking a rag and moving it out. First of all, we have a problem of it's in the public thoroughfare. So there's certain different laws apply in the public thoroughfare. There's certain laws about how to put a fire out on the Sabbath. He says, Shmuel said it's perfectly okay to douse the hot metal, extinguish the metal ember, so to speak, on the Sabbath in the public thoroughfare. However, in order so nobody gets hurt, but he says a burning wood. You say you walk down the street on the Sabbath and you see there's a stick burning or a log burning. He said that no, you don't put out a fire that's made from wood if it's in the middle of the street or in the public domain, any kind of public domain on
Sabbath. Does this make any sense whatsoever? What, it's going to start a fire, got a forest fire, people get killed. Okay, we're not learning the practical law, we're not going to say right now, but there are ways to deal with it. We don't, if it's danger to human life, we suspend the laws of the Sabbath. And if it's not, if it's something that's just burning there in the middle of the street and it's not going to harm anyone, except perhaps a blind person, then it's we don't put out the fire. What if there's a blind person around? Okay, we're talking in a general law, and it's the general law, and there's the exceptions to the law. So in general, we wouldn't put out a log that's burning on the Sabbath in the public domain. That's Shmuel. So if you say that that's following the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, it's nami. So if you say Rabbi Shimon says, what's your intention in putting out dousing the hot metal or dousing the burning wood? Your intention is really so people don't get hurt, but it's not for the sake of to putting out a fire for some kind of use on the Sabbath. There's no use on the Sabbath. For instance, in the old days they used to use charcoal for writing or something, or for think of any kind of use you could have. There's no use. You're not going to. He doesn't want to take the charcoal and write something with it, which would be a violation. All he wants to do is to make it so people don't get hurt. So you'd say that there's why. So the question is, why should Shmuel prohibit if he follows Rabbi Shimon's law? It's questionable whether or not somebody would get hurt or not, right? Rashi says, and his intention. So that's the question of if there's a questionable outcome. It's called Devar She'eino Mitkaven. The outcome may be a violation of the Sabbath. The outcome may be not a violation of the Sabbath. So if you're doing something and you don't, your intention is something else, and that the whatever outcome it is may or may not violate the Sabbath, then it's permitted according to Rabbi Shimon. Somebody throws out, there was a blacksmith, and the blacksmith threw out a piece of hot metal. According to the law of the Torah, there's no obligation to put it out, but there is a prohibition according to the rabbinic law, which is concerned for public safety. The Torah itself is not concerned with public safety. My question to Rashi is, Shmartem et nafshetechem is written in the Torah. And the Nezikin, we know there's laws of Nezikin of damages in the Torah. We're supposed. The Torah teaches us to be concerned for our fellow man, right? So v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha and so forth. Love your neighbor as yourself. Just as you wouldn't want to get burned by something, you don't want somebody else to, right? So we don't. So this is called shvut according to Rashi. Shvut is
the act of throwing out putting aside this ember to a safe place is a shvut. Shvut is a body of law that's not written in the Torah. It's rabbinic in origin, and it's all learned from verses in the book of Isaiah. Etc. If you rest on the Sabbath and you honor the Sabbath from not doing the way you would normally do. So anything that's an uvda dechol, action it's a holidic action. It's an action it's done. You do it between Sunday and Friday a certain way. There's no prohibition of work or any kind of work. Legal work on the Sabbath, on the weekday. So what's the problem? Shvut, because to preserve the character of the Sabbath, there's special ordinances all learned from the Bible.
that basically spelled out by the rabbinic law, such as handling money, and it's another shivut. And like this case of moving the ember to a safe place, putting out a fire. I don't see how Rashi says putting out a fire is shivut. Putting out a fire, that's Rashi needs to be explained. But why the fire is not a problem? Why is it? But wood, why would he prohibit putting out wood? Because wood, according to the Rebbeinu Hananel and the Hai Gaon and others, they say that the fire is, if it's a burning log in the middle of the road on the Sabbath, people are going to see it. The metal, sometimes it's very hot. It's something that could clearly do damage, but you can't see it. It just looks like a piece of metal because it isn't red or white. White is hotter, and then red is less hot, and then it just looks like metal. But unless you're like right up close to it and can feel the heat, you don't know it's hot. So that's why there's already a safeguard measure by people can see the fire. They're going to stay away from the fire. So if Shmuel actually follows Rabbi Shimon's shita, then even fire, putting out the wood should also, because his intention is not to put out the fire, his intention is to safeguard people from damages. Which there is a shade of difference between the two. You might not be able to hearing that statement, you may think, well, what's the difference, really? They're two different things. One is I want to keep people from getting hurt, and the other is to actually put out the fire. So he's putting you could have an action which your intention is just to keep people from getting hurt, but your intention is not to put out the fire in order to use the charcoal for some forbidden purpose. So, b'davar she'einu mitkaven savar laka Rabbi Shimon. So we should this statement of Shmuel is internally contradicting another statement of Shmuel. If he holds like Rabbi Shimon, it doesn't make sense. If he's holding, when Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon, he's talking about a malacha she'eino tzricha legufa. He's talking about an action which you don't need.
There's usually an action which is unintended and there has an uncertain outcome, whether it be a violation or not, and there's a difference between that and that you don't need to do this act. You don't need to do this action. There's an intention, and there's something, and there's the use outcome of your intentions, right? So if it's a malacha she'eino tzricha leguf, then Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon. Sorry, I skipped a line. But davar she'einu mitkaven, if it's something of uncertain outcome that may or not be a violation, then Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon, such as it's an uncertain outcome if you leave the fire going in the street that somebody will get hurt. No, it's permitted to put out the davar she'eino mitkaven should be, the thing he doesn't intend should be about the hot metal. And the thing, but with the malacha she'eino tzricha legufa, when you're talking about a prohibited form of work that you don't really need, you have no need for it. There's a need and there's intention, right? If he doesn't need it, then Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it's forbidden to do a malacha she'eino tzricha leguf. Amar Ravina hilkach kotz b'reshut rabim malichot b'chot b'chot me'arba amot. So in such a case, if there's a thorn in the public thoroughfare, I suppose a nail would be also under this category.
what do? You can't carry the thorn, you can't carry the nail. So you pick it up and you carry it less than 4 cubits. Stop. Carry it less than 4 cubits. Stop. Right? But Carmelite Filatuva, and if it's a Carmelite, it's an area that's not a private domain, it's not a public domain, it's not a Makom Patur, the place is too small, 4x4 handbreadths, it's too small to be a private or public domain, it's a Makom Patur. If it's Carmelite, such as a field or a beach, ocean, then you could actually carry it further, because the law of the private domain and the public domain are d'oraita, and the laws of a Carmelite are d'Rabbanan. Aval Nunten Kule. To explain, even though based on Torah law it's forbidden to carry an object 4 cubits in the public domain, less than 4 cubits in the public domain, there's only a rabbinic prohibition, and that's according to the Shmuel. We learned that in order to prevent damages to the public, the rabbis permitted to go against their laws. So, if the rabbinic law is suspended, if there's any chance of the damage to the public, or any kind of public danger. For this reason, if there was a thorn in a even though the thorn or a spike is, according to the rabbinic law, you can't touch it, you can't carry it, right? You can, because it's something that could cause damage, of course you can. In the Carmelite you could even do more, because in the Carmelites, again, Carmelite is like a field or a beach, perhaps a large park, a forest, I suppose. That in such a case, it's a place that is not enclosed. It doesn't have an enclosure around it, and it's neither a private domain nor a public domain. So in such a case, the only prohibition of carrying in a Carmelite is rabbinic in origin. For that reason, you could even carry it. You could if there's some sort of danger to the people at large, then you can carry it even more than 4 cubits. Aval noten. So the Mishnah talks about the water in the urn. Let's say there's hot water in an urn, or even if the urn had been dumped out and it's still hot. Question is whether or not you can put cold water into it. The Braita teaches, you can put hot water into cold water. However, it's forbidden to put tzonin l'toch chamin, to put cold water into hot water, because according to Beit Shammai, the cold water will heat up from coming in contact with or mixing in with the hot water. Beit Hillel omrim ben chamin levei l'toch tzonin uvein tzonin l'toch chamin mutar. So, according to Beit Shammai, again, a person can put hot water into cold water, but not cold water into hot water. Because when you put cold water into hot water, that's heating up the cold water. You put hot water into cold water, it's cooling down the hot water, and the permission is heating up to a cook point of over 42 degrees Celsius or so. How hot does water have to be if you can't touch it? 40 degrees, 42 degrees. After that, it burns for the average person. So, Beit Hillel says, whether it's hot water in the cold water or whether it's cold water in the hot water, it's permitted. But what are we talking about? Because Beit Hillel says, we're not talking about a big urn, we're talking about a cup. But in a bathtub, that you can put hot water into the cold water, but you cannot put the cold water into the hot water. But Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh oser. How about Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says that is actually forbidden, to even to put the cold water, the hot water into the cold water is forbidden. Amar Rav Nachman halach Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. Rav Nachman says that the law is like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. Savar la Rav Yosef lememar. Savar Rav Yosef lememar sefel harehu kanbati. Rav Yosef says that a sefel is like a bathtub. Now, what's a sefel? A sefel comes from a Greek. It's actually an old word, and it's an ancient word, sefel. Generally, it means a large vessel, like a big, something bigger than this, I suppose. Definitely something bigger than this. Now that's called heating up on the Sabbath. Yeah. It's not the Sabbath today, but if I were, the question is, can you drink hard liquor on the Sabbath? Might burn. So anyhow. Oh, darn it. So, I guess I have to quit smoking. No more cigarettes and no more money. Unless somebody wants to dedicate one of the My Drunk Gemaras. So support the cigarette fund. Yeah, fat chance in today's world. Anyhow, how about the cigar fund, the pipe tobacco fund? Yes, much more distinguished. Yes. So, where were we? Sefel. What's a sefel? It's a large vessel, big thing for water or for liquids, right? Pot, perhaps. A bowl, could mean a bowl. For a large, it's often used for washing. In the old days, we didn't have showers so much. We had spouts of water all over the place. A sefel, to mean in the modern usage about a small vessel like a coffee cup is sometimes called a sefel. Then that's a modern usage, and it's nowhere in the sources do we find something the size of a coffee cup or a small bowl used in the ancient language. Sefel was a large thing that used to dump water on themselves to wash. So the question is, if you use a sefel in a bathtub, what is the law? We say if you have, what do we just say? We said in a bathtub, according to Beit Hillel, according to the Gemara, Beit Hillel is talking about a cup. However, in a bathtub, you can put hot water into the cold water, but you cannot put cold water into the hot water in the bathtub. Rabbi Yosef said that the water in the sefel is just like the water in the bathtub. We don't make a distinction, and we don't say it's permitted. In other words, you have a big thing of hot water in a sefel, in a large vessel for washing, and you have hot water in it. You cannot put the cold water in. However, if in the sefel, it would be permitted if there's cold water in the sefel to put the hot water on top and add it after the cold water is already in it. Rabbi Yosef said that the law of the sefel is just like the law of the bathtub. Abaye said, according to the teachings of Rabbi Chia, a sefel is not just like the same law as the bathtub. Why did he remove his initial? Why did Rabbi Chia change his mind and say that the sefel is not like the ambati? So Abaye initially thought, we're talking about Abaye's opinion. Rabbi Yosef said a seifel is just like the bathtub. Abaye comes in and quotes Rabbi Chia and says the seifel is not like the bathtub. Why did they change their minds? Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman explains why the methods were changed. Halacha ka Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya ele b'Shabbat rechitza b'chamin leika. No, it's a rhetorical question. Halacha ka Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya ele b'Shabbat rechitza b'chamin leika. So according to Rav Nachman, they didn't ever hear about it for prohibition of washing, the general prohibition of washing with hot water on the Sabbath. Now, we've been discussing in the previous pages of the Talmud how there is a general prohibition of washing with hot water on the Sabbath, but they weren't general prohibitions. They were gezerot. It was a gezerah because people were the bath attendant, the person in charge of the bathhouse, was heating up the fire underneath the bathhouse. So, according to the Torah, there's no prohibition of washing with hot water on the Sabbath. And today, if you can verify that you have water from before the Sabbath that's heated up, and that no cold water goes in your water boiler, then you can use that hot water on the Sabbath. The problem is you adjust the knob. You put cold and hot in the middle, and it mixes cold and hot. So what do you have to do? If you can establish that it is a fact beyond reproach that you have water heated up before the Sabbath and no cold water will go into it, then you can, and that's water is suitable for washing, not too hot, right? Then you can actually wash with that water on the Sabbath. If you have a solar water heater, and you can establish that no cold water is going to go into the boiler, then there's absolutely no problem with using that water to wash on the Sabbath. There are other problems with washing. You have to use soft soap. You can't wash your entire body, like we discussed earlier. You save one part of your body unwashed, so it's not the same way we do it on a weekday. And of course, be careful when you're drying off not to actually wring out any liquid from the towel. But other than that, though, actual washing, there's no prohibition whatsoever. Go ahead and wash. But you have to establish again that you're not actually heating up water, because even if it's a solar water heater, the water that's actually heated up by the sun is permitted. But then if water that's already been heated up by the sun could actually cook, it's called toldot hachama. Chama, the sun itself, is cooking the initial water. Now, I question this also. The question is, in a solar water panel, you got water, basically it's like this. You got your solar water panel. There are copper pipes that are against the reflectors, so the sun heats up the reflector panel, and then the rays of the sun heat up the copper pipe. Now the question is that's heating up the copper pipe, which is heating up the water, or could you somehow establish that the rays of the sun are directly heating up the water? If it's the copper pipe or whatever kind of metal they use in a solar panel to heat up water, if it's directly coming from the sun, there's no problem. However, if it's a toldot, or there's a decree that you cannot
we just learned that it's prohibited to heat something up from a derivative of the sun, not directly from the sun, but a derivative. Why? Because people, once you have hot water, you don't know where it came from, and you think, oh, somebody might get mixed up, and actually we want to prohibit people from actually heating up water from fire or electricity, which is equated to fire. So why should the actual water from the solar panel be permitted? It should be prohibited. I know there's a way to permit it. I just don't have the words in front of me. Let's keep going. So here in this case, Rav Nachman says the law is like Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, who said it's forbidden even to put hot water into cold water. Rav Nachman affirms this, but says rather, whoever said you can't use hot water to wash yourself on the Sabbath? Whoever said Rabbi Shimon is referring to the last clause in the Mishnah. Arishakai, Rabbi Shimon is referring to the first clause in the Mishnah, which says, the first clause is that the hot urn, which was taken off of the stove, you can't put cold water in it because the hot urn will heat it up. Whether there's water or not in that urn doesn't matter. It will still heat up the cold water, even if there's not. Okay, but the question is the meaning of the word pinahu. Does it mean took it off of the stove, or does it mean you dumped out the water from the hot urn? It's whether it's still on the stove or not. It's hot metal, right? That's so again. The Mishnah prohibits putting cold water into the hot metal vessel, but he can put. And then there's a vague language, but he puts it in it. What's it? We are going to assume, and which the Gemara also assumes, as we saw in the Gemara, that pouring pinahu doesn't mean just took it off. It means you poured out the water, so you have hot metal. But if it still has water in it, the Mishnah says, if he puts it in the hot vessel that still has hot water in it, or in a cup that has hot water in it, you can put cold water in it to warm it up. So we don't learn the law according to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is sufficiently vague and ancient that we need to update a little bit. So the first clause was the empty vessel. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh is referring to the empty vessel that heats up the water. Rashi says the Tanakama does not permit, it only permits hot water into cold water. And then he comes along and he prohibits even putting the Mishnah, Tanakama, and the Mishnah permits. The Tanakama and the Mishnah permits putting hot water into cold water. And then he comes along and forbids it.
You don't want to come?
1 second. What are we doing?
Rock climbing.
Rock climbing. Do you want me to come?
I thought you were coming and holding me.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to go rock climbing with my son. Have a good Shabbos and be well.